All right, welcome back to the Press Box Podcast, our first episode of 2018. Happy New Year. We're going to start off talking a little bit about the college football playoff. We had the Rose Bowl ending yesterday as well as the Sugar Bowl, so our national championship game is set. We'll talk about the two bowl games from yesterday, preview the national championship game, as well as some other college football stuff here as bowl season ends up. And then we'll talk about the NFL, a big weekend, wild card weekend coming up. With 4 games, 2 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday. We'll break those down. And then lastly, we'll finish up with some NFL coaching news and some storylines heading into the playoffs and offseason.
Okay, so we had a big day in college football yesterday. The college football playoffs got started. We had 2 football games. The Rose Bowl was one semifinal, Georgia against Oklahoma. The Sugar Bowl was the other semifinal, Alabama against Clemson. And my co-host, Joseph, and our producer, Nathan, had the privilege of attending the Georgia-Oklahoma game. So I'm going to let Joseph kick us off here.
Exactly. So, yeah, I mean, first of all, let me just say that if you're going to go to or get the chance to go to a college bowl game, I think the Rose Bowl, they call it the granddad of them all because it's the oldest, but I think it's definitely the best experience you can have in terms of college bowl game, and just in terms of the stadium, the atmosphere surrounding it, and everything that goes along with it. So just that needs to be said first. The Rose Bowl is always a great game, but like you said, this year, the fact that it is a playoff game, part of the college football playoff, there's a lot more at stake. So, and like you said, me and Nathan, our producer, didn't really have a dog in the fight, so to speak. We just wanted to see a great game, and we definitely saw one. I think that definitely all weekend at the game, first of all, there's a lot more Georgia fans at the game than Oklahoma fans. So in terms of crowd, I think it was almost more, it drifted more towards a Georgia home game, which might have been noticeable on television as well. But the thing that stood out to me about the game, first and foremost, was Georgia's ability to run the football, which they used their two-headed monster, Chubb and Michelle, and they basically did what they wanted for most of the game in terms of them being able to run the ball in Oklahoma, and I think that made the biggest impression on me from just the standpoint of how the game was played. And then Georgia's defense, stepping up a little bit and playing better in the second half, combined with that running game, was able to get them to win.
Well, it was interesting to me. I agree with everything that you said, but it was interesting to me watching the game on TV. First, I agree with you. It was nice watching a classic game like that without having a dog in the hunt. Because
Right.
if my team would have been there, if Notre Dame would have been there, I would have been on eggshells. And to lose a game like that would have been devastating. To win a game like that would have been exhilarating. So
Right.
I'll say that to start with. I agree with everything you said. The interesting thing to me was, the odds makers had the over at 61. And of course, they shot that out of the water
Yeah.
with 102 points.
Right.
But it was interesting because it seemed like the Georgia defense, which I thought was going to be able to not shut down, but severely limit Oklahoma, had trouble doing that in the first half. They made some tremendous adjustments at halftime, and they were able then in the second half to put some pressure on Mayfield and at least slow Oklahoma down. I think Oklahoma scored 31 in the first half. They only scored 14 if you discount the overtime
Right.
in the second half. Oklahoma, on the other hand, I don't think their defense really saw an offense with the ability to run the football like Georgia all year long in the Big 12. So that was difficult for them.
Right.
But then again, I think Georgia's defense, no matter how much they prepared going into this game, didn't really see an offense that could run the spread as well as Oklahoma did in the SEC. So you had 2 teams that kind of had to feel each other out for a while before they could figure out what adjustments to make. And obviously, Georgia made the better adjustments.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. Pretty much every conference has an identity, right? So, like you said, Big 12 is you're going to air the ball out. There's a lot of points being put up. Not really known as a defensive conference. Then you have the SEC, which you have teams like Alabama, LSU, yeah, and Georgia as well. Low-scoring games, hard-hitting, defensive, more of that style. So when you get those two styles to clash, something has to give, and that's what you saw yesterday. I think we should touch on this too. A big kind of momentum shift I thought was that I guess it's not an onside kick, but their squib kick attempt, Oklahoma's right before
Yes.
halftime. Who I think I see what they were doing kind of, but I think they just poorly executed it, and it went right to the guy in the Georgia player right in the front line there, and he just fell on it with 6 seconds left, and they were able to get a field goal. But I would have just kicked it away. I mean, kicks were going out of the back of the end zone all game, and if you can just get one out of the end zone, you put them back in their 20 with the 6 seconds, and they just take a knee, and then you go in. But they were able to make that 55-yard field goal, and which is a Rose Bowl record, by the way,
Right.
longest field goal in Rose Bowl history, and that really gave them a lot of momentum going in the second half, which you could see is when they came out.
Hey, I agree with you 100%. I'm not one for hyperbole, but I'm going to say right now that that one play changed the complete complexion of the game.
Yeah,
And what I mean by that is Georgia's down 31-14 with 6 seconds left. They're facing going into halftime, needing three scores to get back in that game. Oklahoma, as you very very eloquently said, mishandled or misexecuted the squib kick. Georgia gets the ball at midfield, completes one pass, and their kicker kicks his own personal record. Forget about a Rose Bowl record. His best was 54 before that, and he kicks a 55-yard field goal. Didn't seem like much at the time, but think about it. Georgia goes in the locker room. One, their kicker now thinks he can make anything.
right. Yeah,
Two, they're within two touchdowns, just two scores of Oklahoma, and they know they can run the football because they did that in the first half. So that one play really changed the complexion of that football game, as hard as it is to believe that.
yeah, and a lot of the Georgia fans that were kind of around us, I think, felt the same way. I mean, you could hear them talking amongst themselves like, "Oh, that's going to be big. That was big," and just from a fan's perspective, that kind of settled them down a little bit before the second half started. So you can only imagine what it did for the teams in the locker room. And yeah, I mean, that definitely, like we said, it seems small. Obviously, it was only 3 points, and Oklahoma still had plenty of chances to win the game. But to overlook that is, I think, not good either. So
Well, I mean, it was just a great game. I mean, it was like a prize fight. I mean, Oklahoma's ahead 31-17. Georgia roars back and scores 21 points after that to go ahead 38-31. Georgia, they made the quarterback for a true freshman played an outstanding football game.
yeah,
He made one mistake, and that one mistake could have cost him, but he got away with it. Was when he tried to get rid of the football, and they called intentional
yeah,
grounding.
yeah,
That could have very easily been called a fumble because Oklahoma picked up that football, and that could have changed the complexion right there. But he got lucky. It was incomplete pass. It was intentional grounding. They punted the ball away, but then they fumbled the ball. Michelle's one mistake was he got hit pretty hard trying to make extra yards. The Oklahoma player's helmet got on the ball. He fumbles it. They pick it up, run in for a touchdown. So it was kind of like, excuse me, kind of like Rock'em Sock'em Robots. One team takes a hit, the other team hits back. Another team takes a hit, the other team hits back. And it really kind of was fitting if you were just a fan like we were to say, okay, yeah, this game should go into overtime.
yeah, right, right. And with the college overtime the way it is, both teams get possessions obviously, and you said it earlier, which I think I kind of pointed out, or we talked about it during the game, where the Georgia's kicker being able to make that 55-yard field goal gave him the mental confidence in overtime to make these
Right.
field goals that are going to be, in that 20 to 30-yard range where,
Right.
had he either missed it or not been able to attempt it, a lot of pressures on those college kickers in overtime, and they handled it well.
Yeah, I made fun of Chris Fowler a little bit during the broadcast because he was talking about the Oklahoma kicker. He punts, he kicks off,
Right.
and he kicks field goals. So Chris Fowler made the comment they showed him walking. He looks like he's worn out, and I thought, how can you be worn out being a kicker? I mean, I don't care if you have to punt, kick off, kick field goals for 3 games in a row. How can you be worn out? But the more I think about it now after the fact, I wouldn't say he was worn out. But it takes a little bit of mental pressure,
Right.
or it takes a little bit of your mental focus away when you're having to do so many things. And who knows, in the back of his mind, he might still have been carrying the misexecution of that squib kick.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Because I mean, even in the NFL, you see some kickers that do kick off and kick field goals. A lot of them do, but sometimes you have that dude's your shepherd, and certainly not punting and kicking. So, yeah, I mean that there's a point there. I mean, yeah, not physically worn out, but maybe a little bit mentally being pulled in different directions, which is a good point too. So, yeah, so that game, obviously instant classic. Georgia's in. Okay, they're in the championship. The second
No
game,
question.
Clemson and Alabama. I didn't get to see as much of, so I'll let you start off with that one. Kind of your reaction to that,
Well,
and going forward into next week.
I can sum that up. After watching the Oklahoma Georgia game, I can sum up the Alabama Clemson game in one word: boring. Now, if you're an Alabama fan, it wasn't boring. But
Right.
and if they were my team, but there really wasn't. Alabama had control of that football game from the get go, and they talked to Saban at halftime when Alabama was ahead 10-3, and he said, "Hey," he said, they asked him if he was happy with his team selection. He said, "Hey," he said, that's the champion over there that we're playing. He goes, you expect them to play hard. He goes, but we have not executed the way we need to execute. And they came out in the second half and just smothered Clemson. I mean, even if Deshaun Watson was there from last year, I still think Clemson would have lost that football game because Alabama's defense showed a defensive ability that they hadn't showed in a few weeks. And I don't know if it was the 6 weeks or 5 weeks that they had to rest, because they hadn't played since November 24th. If it was the time to prepare, but their defense smothered Clemson. And if Alabama had a quarterback like Georgia does, or had a quarterback like Oklahoma does, nobody would come within 3 touchdowns of them. But Alabama's one drawback is their quarterback's ability to stretch the field. And going into that game, the big thing was last year Clemson ran 99 plays because Alabama could not convert on third down. This year they did a little bit better this year, but they still have trouble moving the football down the field consistently. And if they're not able to do that against Georgia, and Georgia's able to crank up that running game, then Alabama's defense could be on the field quite a long time as opposed to what they were last night.
Yeah, I think I saw this morning where the early line was Alabama was favored by, I think, 4.5, around that number,
Right.
which I think is probably fair. Do you think that the fact that it's in Atlanta, which is basically a home game for Georgia, has any effect whatsoever? Because I mean, Alabama's not really that far away from the stadium, so it's not like they're traveling far out either.
No,
But you think that plays into it at all?
no, I think it's kind of a sub-home game for Alabama. I mean, they've opened up the last 3 college football seasons
Yeah, that's a good
in
point.
Atlanta,
Good
playing
point.
in the opening game. They've played in the SEC championship with the exception of this year, the last 3 or 4 or 5 years in a row. So no, I don't think so. I think for Alabama and Georgia, they're both going to be extremely comfortable in that setting. I think it's going to be a great football game. I think, I'm a defensive guy. As you know, I'm an old school defensive guy. Run the football, stop the run, and both teams can run it very well. Georgia has a 2-headed monster, as you alluded to. Alabama does not. Georgia's quarterback is a little bit better throwing the football than Alabama's quarterback. Alabama's quarterback can make things happen with his legs. I think Alabama's defense, to me, is a little bit more physical and NFL ready than Georgia's defense is. So that's really what I'm going to be watching is how well can Georgia run the football against Alabama, because I know Alabama will be able to run it some against Georgia. So, I mean, it sets itself up to be, it sets itself up to be like a 14-10 game, but who knows what's going to happen. But I think it's going to be a defensive struggle. I really don't see either team scoring a lot of points, in this game. I think if Georgia gets the lead or it's close, they're going to want to run the football. They couldn't do that very well. They ran it very well last night, but they had to throw it more than they liked because they were so far behind for so long.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, gosh, I think here's another thing to throw out, and I'll let you comment on it, is you've got a Saban disciple, okay, in Kirby Smart,
Right.
playing against Alabama, and I think they showed last night where Saban is 11-0 against his former coaches when he's played them with their new team. So this is a chance for Kirby Smart to break that streak as well. Nick Saban knows everything to know about Kirby Smart, but you also know that Kirby Smart knows everything to know about Nick Saban.
I was gonna say I hadn't heard the stat you just threw out there, which is interesting, but I think, man, it might favor Georgia a little bit because that streak I would think has to end sometime. I mean, they're due eventually, right? And my initial response to that matchup is that I think it favors Georgia in that, like you said, he knows all about Alabama, and not so much that he just knows about him. He's been he's worked at the program, been around the program, been close to Saban. So there's not that kind of like awe, like mystery, building up Alabama as some like immortal college team. And he's been there. He's been around. They're just they're an excellent college football team. But they're not any different than any other SEC team in terms of
Right.
they're all college players, right? So
Right.
I think
Right.
that if you're a school coming in from afar and maybe you don't play Alabama regularly or haven't been around them and you just kind of see them built up to be this mega team, not that they're going to be actually intimidated, but you just kind of in your mind think, well, I don't, can we beat them? But
Right. Right.
I think Georgia's going to have the right mindset going in. I mean, like I said, I don't really pull for either of these teams, but I'd like to see Georgia win personally.
Well, I would too.
I think that'd be excellent.
I would too. I mean, and I think most of America probably would as well.
Right.
I think the ratings are going to be down because I think if you're in California, do you really want to watch the SEC championship part two?
No, yeah, right.
I think most people will, but I think the ratings will be down. But I think most of America would want Georgia to win as well. I think the Georgia players. I agree with you. I think the reason Georgia has the edge is, after that game last night, you're playing with house money. I mean, These guys. Hey, that game could have gone either way. One drop, one run, one mistake, and Georgia could be the team packing up their equipment today. So they have to go into this game saying, hey, guys, we got nothing to lose. I mean, we're playing for a national championship. We've got nothing to lose. Alabama, on the other hand, while it's sort of the same, they kind of feel like it's their birthright to win the national championship. Yeah. And after they destroyed Clemson the way they did, they're going in with a little bit of pressure because they don't want to have a team from their own conference show them up, So right. It's really going to be an interesting game, and I think the head games and the strategy between the two coaches, since they know each other so well, is also going to be kind of an understory to the game as well. So it's going to be a really good game, not a classic like Georgia Oklahoma was, but I think it's going to be a really good game.
Right. So let me ask you this. Should UCF be in this title game instead of one of these two teams? And do you think they would actually either have a legitimate chance to win or possibly could win against either of these two teams? What do you think of that whole situation? Because they beat Auburn yesterday.
Yeah, they did. That's exactly right. They did. And gosh, that opens up a real Pandora's box. Let me start by saying that, I think, the committee chairman or the chairman of the committee that made these selections came out today and said that he justified their ranking of UCF as number 12 going into this thing because he quoted their schedule. Okay.
Right.
And I see some of that. Okay. I do see some of that, but given the way the system is set up right now, I don't think UCF should have been in the championship.
I agree.
Right. Because the way it's set up right now.
Right.
But stepping away from that, if you go 13-0 or 12-0, I think you should have a chance to play for a national championship. Yeah. And the only way that's going to happen is if you set it up like we've talked about off air.
Right.
Have 6 teams or 8 teams, have one of these mid-major teams or however you want to call them, have a chance to get in. Now, they can say, I said this last night, and I heard the Central Florida UCF coach said it today, right out of my mouth. He said the same thing. He said, hey, we beat the team that beat both those teams that are playing for the national championship.
Right.
Okay. And yeah, I get some of that.
Yeah.
But then again, Auburn, I mean, while this sounds like sour grapes, Auburn really didn't have a whole lot to play for yesterday.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And UCF did. UCF had a tremendous amount to play for. So that factored into it a little bit as well. Had this game been played on, say, December 1st with the winner going to the playoff,
right.
I think you'd have seen a different Auburn team show up, maybe.
Right.
But to answer your original question, I think UCF should have been in a playoff
right.
under a different system.
Right.
And that's what we have to get to is that different system because, you got a lot of factors going on. I mean, what if Notre Dame would have won out and ended up 11-1? They would have kicked probably Alabama out.
Right.
So there's got to be a way to factor in more than just 4 teams because I think on any given year, there's at least 6 teams that are qualified and justifiably should be in a playoff.
Yeah, and we talked about that in one of our earlier podcasts. You threw out some different scenarios out there and stuff we'd like to see. But, yeah, you said it. The way it's set up now, the committee's job is to pick the best 4 teams. Just period, best 4 teams. And I think that
right.
UCF, especially going into the bowl season, was not one of the best four teams. I think obviously they got it right. But yeah, but all the other factors we just talked about, I think it's really kind of a shame they didn't get a shot in a playoff format because everybody, especially if you're not a diehard fan of a certain team, everybody likes the underdog. It'd be a good story. The same reason why people love the NCAA basketball tournament. These teams that make runs.
Exactly.
Right. So I mean, yeah, I think it'd be good for college football, and I think that they deserve a chance. Going 12-0 to be able to prove themselves, but they really, at the end of the day, the way it's set up, they don't really have anything to complain about because they weren't one of the best four teams. And I think that,
No.
Again, we always talk about the way it is now. I think that, deep down, maybe their head coach and their athletic director probably realizes that, but they would, they have to promote their team and do what they need to do.
Well, you brought up the NCAA tournament. I think that's a great example. Is that, there's always going to be a team left out, right? But if you look at the NCAA tournament, when they have Selection Sunday, the 64 teams get in, right? There's always one or two teams on the bubble, and they talk for about a half an hour, the talking heads, hey, how come this team didn't get in? But within a week, it's gone. Nobody's saying, hey, you remember Illinois? They should have got into the tournament because they realized that they probably should have. But in college football, there's always going to be that lingering thing. I mean, Ohio State, as much as I don't agree that they should have been in, they can certainly say that they should be in. UCF can say that they should be in.
Right.
Wisconsin could even say, hey, we were 12-0. We lost one game, and because it was the last game, we didn't get in. So if you put 8 teams in there, there'll be no doubt. Because after you take the top 8, the 9th team, I don't care who it is going to have at least 2 losses, maybe 3, so there'll be no doubt.
Right. So, I agree with pretty much everything you said there. Lastly, though, Notre Dame did play yesterday.
They did.
And they did win yesterday against LSU. So they finally beat an SEC school in a bowl.
Well, they beat LSU a few years ago in the Music City.
Right, that's true. That's true. I guess I'm in this bowl was the Citrus Bowl, a little bit of a higher profile bowl than the Music City
Correct.
Bowl. So
Correct.
A little bit bigger stage in New Year's Day, and they were able to get it done. So what did you see there that you liked?
Well, a couple things. Believe it or not, as much as I'm not a big Brian Kelly fan, Brian Kelly became only the 4th Notre Dame coach in history to have multiple 10-win seasons.
Yeah.
And the only other ones were Knute Rockne, Ara Parseghian, and Lou Holtz. And to me, that's pretty impressive, when you're one of only 4 Notre Dame coaches in history that have had multiple 10-win seasons. So he's got that going for him. They turned the program completely around from 4-8 last year to 10-3 this year with a big bowl win. But again, Notre Dame, their quarterback, we talked about this. He's had trouble all year long throwing the football. After that Miami game, he was in a funk, and he was still in a funk yesterday. They benched him in the second quarter and ended up playing the backup quarterback for the rest of the game. And the kid, while he doesn't have the athleticism that Wimbush has, he was able to make some throws, avoid the pass rush. He made some great runs, and it looked like he had a command and a leadership of that team that was pretty impressive for a backup quarterback. And then they won it on a tremendous throw. I mean, it was a 50-yard touchdown pass. Big, tall receiver, batted the ball in the air, caught it, avoided 2 guys, and went in for the touchdown. And then Notre Dame's defense on that last drive, when LSU got the ball back with 50 seconds, I was really impressed with their defensive coordinator. He didn't step back and play prevent. Even though LSU needed a touchdown, he blitzed them. I mean, he pressured Etling, the quarterback for LSU, just about every other snap. And then he would show pressure for 2 snaps, and then he would drop 8 guys into coverage.
Right.
He had them so confused that it was a foregone conclusion that they were not going to be able to score. So I was impressed with that. But let me get on my soapbox for just a minute, if you'll allow me to.
Okay.
I think, and I told my wife this. Your mother, my wife. I told her that Notre Dame will never win a national championship under their current construct, and the reason is, one, their schedule is too tough. All right. I mean, when you're 6-1, okay, or what were they, 8-1, I guess it was, and now you got to face Miami on the road, you got to face Stanford on the road, you got to play Navy. Their schedule is too tough. They need some breathers in there that, like these other teams do, where and play more of the tough games on the front end. So if you lose one of them, like they did to Georgia, it doesn't matter when you get later in the season. So that's something they're going to have to address, is how much do they want to appease the fans throughout the country by playing all these tough teams. Okay. The second thing is, you know, if they don't start looking at their academic standards from a football standpoint, whenever I see them play against an SEC team, even yesterday, they look slow, even against Miami. I mean, this offensive line, which was supposed to be one of the best in the country, they just looked like they were stuck in mud, you know? And if they can't get these guys that these other schools can get, they're always going to be playing just a little bit of a level behind these other schools. Now, most people say, well, Stanford's got those standards, Vanderbilt's got those standards, Northwestern. Okay, Northwestern won 10 games this year, but did you see them in the playoff?
I was just going to say, those schools aren't winning national championships.
Exactly. So that's my point, is that if Notre Dame wants to just win 10 games occasionally and go to a big bowl, fine. Tell us alumni that that's our goal. I'll be happy with that. But don't tell the alumni that your goal is to compete for national championships, because it's really not. I mean, Notre Dame does not have the type of talent that the Alabamas, Georgias, Oklahomas, Ohio States have. They just don't have it. And if they're not going to be able to do that, then they're not going to be able to compete at that level. Now, do I think Notre Dame's come a long way since that national championship debacle against Alabama 5 years ago?
Yeah, right.
Right, but they're still not quite to the level that you need to be at week in and week out, and that's kind of the issue. But all in all, it was a good season, 10-3.
Yeah, like you said it earlier, much better than last season. A big turnaround, and I think you definitely feel better going into this offseason than you did last offseason, I think.
Exactly. Except now they're going to have to decide, is this backup quarterback going to be the starter, or are they going to go with with the other kid? So, you got to be able to throw the football. I told my wife, your mother, this morning, that, I don't care what you do in football, whether it's the NFL or college, more so in the NFL, but in college too. If you do not have a quarterback that can throw that football down the field from time to time, you are not going to win big, because teams will be able to shut down your run for enough time to put you in a hole. So you got to be able to throw it some, and Notre Dame doesn't seem to be able to do that right now. So we'll see.
Yeah. All right, so let's shift gears here a little bit here before we sign off and talk some NFL. First round of the playoffs coming up this weekend, okay? And for me, a lot of people, I know a lot of people feel differently than I do, but the NFL is the top-notch football for me. College football is nice. I enjoyed the bowl season. Obviously, going to the Rose Bowl, I'll watch the national championship game. But the NFL is what really gets me going as a football fan. So let's run through all 4 games here this weekend and kind of break them down. So we've got, starting Saturday, first game, Titans at Chiefs. A game which we were at week 1, 2014.
Right.
And surely we didn't think that'd be a playoff matchup only 3 years later, with the Chiefs coming on strong the past couple of years, and the Titans turning it around this year. So right off the bat, looking at that game, I don't see the Titans winning this game. I think that the Chiefs, especially at home, I don't think they're going to make a lot of noise in the playoffs either. But for this game, I can see them just kind of taking care of business, not being too flashy. Alex Smith doing what he does, which is not make mistakes, not doing anything spectacular, but just kind of throwing to those tight ends, swing passes out of the backfield. They're going to get a pass rush on Mariota. They're going to play some good defense, and with that crowd at home, I just don't really see the Titans winning this game.
No, I agree with you. I think Marcus Mariota is still questionable. I mean, he made some really bad throws, some throws that make you scratch your head against the Jaguars Sunday. The only caveat to what you talked about that I would throw in is, depends on what the weather is in Kansas City. If it's a game if it's really windy and the passing game becomes a crapshoot, I think the Titans have more of an ability to control the game with their running game than the Chiefs do.
That's true.
That would be the only factor where I would give the Titans a chance. But if they're able to throw the football, I have to give the edge to the Chiefs, and I agree with you. I think the Chiefs win that game.
Yeah. I mean, the weather, you never know, which I hadn't even thought of, which is an excellent point. But one place where the weather will be more predictable and good weather will be Los Angeles on Saturday night. Falcons at Rams. And the Press Box podcast will be represented there again. Me and my producer will be taking in that game in person. So excited to see that one as well. This game's a little more interesting. I think that you have the Falcons coming off the Super Bowl berth the previous year, and they're back in the playoffs. And traditionally, you see a lot of times those teams that lose the Super Bowl, you fail to make the playoffs next year. So
Correct.
that part was well done by them. And this game, though, gosh, I really could see this going either way because the Rams, although they had a great year and win their division, that playoff experience and just the kind of the lack of just veterans that have been around a long time on that
Right.
team as compared to the Falcons with Matt Ryan and some guys in defense. But I think that, um, I guess I want the Rams to win, but
I know.
I honestly, I could see the Falcons winning this game. I think I'd have to pick them probably.
Did you? So the Press Box podcast has press credentials for this game, or are
No,
they just
no,
going to be in the stands?
not quite yet, not yet.
Not yet. Are working on that,
Yeah,
right? Okay. Um, yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think your heart tells you the Rams, but your head tells you the Falcons. And the only reason is because Matt Ryan is probably easily one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL,
yeah,
maybe the top 6 or 7. Jared Goff is going to be a very, very good quarterback in this league for many, many years. But he's in his second year. He's never been in a playoff situation before. And, like John Madden used to say many years ago, it's one thing to be playing in a football game in the regular season when you're behind with 6 minutes left in the game because you got next week. But in the
yes,
playoffs, the finality starts to set in and the pressure. And I'm not sure that Goff can handle that. He might if they get in that situation. I think the Rams would be well served to feed the Falcons a heavy diet of Todd Gurley
oh
early
yeah,
in the game
oh yeah,
and see if they can establish a lead with him and get Goff throwing some really high percentage passes to move the football down the field until he kind of gets comfortable in the playoff environment. The Falcons defense is pretty good, but we talked about this after, I think, in one of the previous podcasts after their Thursday night game with the Saints. The Falcons defense is built to play with the lead. I mean, they're a quick, fast defense, but they're not as big and physical as some other defenses. So if the Rams can get the lead and start pounding them, I think the Falcon defense is a bit susceptible. So, gosh, it's going to be a really good football game. And you know, I think the Rams are going to pull it out. I
yeah,
really do.
yeah,
I think the Rams are going to pull it out. And the only thing the Rams almost got themselves in a little bit of a crack. And what I mean by that is they rested everybody Sunday and got beat by the 49ers.
right,
Okay. If the Saints had not lost to the Buccaneers, the Rams would have fallen to the 4th seed and they'd be hosting the Panthers Sunday.
right,
So, not that would have been any better or worse, but, it could have been. I mean, it could have been a lot worse. Let's say the Seahawks had made it, So, that concerns me a little bit. I mean, I never liked resting players. I just don't like it very
yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah,
The Giants. Let me say one thing real quick, and I'll let you go on. The Giants in 2007, when they won the Super Bowl to beat the undefeated Patriots, in Week 16, the Patriots were playing for an undefeated season. The Giants were locked into the 5th seed. They
yeah,
couldn't improve that. They played everybody and played the Patriots down to the wire and ended up winning the Super Bowl. But in the next year, in 2008, the Giants had the number 1 seed locked up, rested everybody in Week 16, and lost the first round to the Eagles. So I don't like the rest. The Cowboys did the same thing last year and lost to the Packers.
yeah.
So I don't like that. And that's the one thing that would concern me. The Falcons have been in a playoff mode for 3 weeks now. The Rams have not. And that's what gives them a little bit of an edge is that they're clicking. They're in that mode where the Rams have almost got to kick it back into gear again.
And that was similar to what I was going to say. Just that you've seen over the past few years so many instances of teams like the Falcons or, I think the Ravens one year and multiple other teams who had to play those week 15, 16, 17 games to get in. They won them and they just rode that momentum all the way to the Super Bowl. So I do like that about the Falcons as well. And I like your point about Gurley too. I think that if the Rams can get him rolling, then that's going to give them a much bigger advantage than just what Goff can give them. So first game on Sunday here, game number 3, and who would have thought even last year at this point, if you said, hey, next year first round is going to be Bills and Jaguars in the playoffs, not sure many people would have believed you there. Kind of an unconventional playoff matchup of late, but there you have it. Like I said, Bills and Jaguars. That Jacksonville defense is I think even a little bit underrated. I think they're an excellent defense. They're playing at home. Tyrod Taylor, I'm not quite a believer. I mean, they did bench him for Nate. What was his last name again?
Oh,
No,
Peterman.
Peterman, right? He threw five interceptions.
Nathan Peterman. Yeah.
Yes, the
Yeah.
infamous five interceptions in the first half game and one back to Taylor. But
Right.
they did actually bench him, so they must not have been seeing what they wanted to see out of him. So I think when you combine his leadership of the Bills' offense into Jacksonville against that defense, I don't see the Bills winning this game.
No, I don't see it either. I think Blake Bortles made some curious throws again Sunday.
Yeah,
but not only did LaShawn McCoy got hurt Sunday against the Dolphins, and they're not sure if he's going to play yet Sunday. They think he's going to be able to play,
right.
But even if he does, I mean, they had to cart him off the field, which
Yeah.
is never a good sign.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with you. I think the Jaguars at home with that defense are probably a little bit too much for the Bills. The only caveat again is if Bortles starts reverting to his old form and throws the ball around, and the Bills, you never know what's going to happen. You know what I mean? And really, when you think about it, the Bills, not the Bills, but the Ravens did the Jaguars a tremendous service, because had the Ravens taken care of business, the Jaguars would be hosting the Titans Sunday. Because the Titans would have been the 6th seed, the Ravens would have been the 5th seed, and playing a team for the third time, a team that knows you real well is never easy. But I think they got the matchup that favors them, and I agree with you. I think the Jaguars win that football game.
Yeah, and you basically led into the last game here, and you're talking about third time matchups. You got the Panthers and Saints, okay, division matchup. So let's see here on. December 3rd, all right, the Saints won 31-21. And then you have, back in September 24th, the Saints won 34-13. So you have the Saints winning both those games. And you always hear the old saying, it's very difficult to beat a team 3 times in a season. But it can be done. So with all that being said, Saints get the home game. For me, I always like Drew Brees at home. I think that when the Saints are good, and this year they are good, obviously in the playoffs, hosting the Panthers, I can't go against Drew Brees in the dome when they have things rolling there. And Cam Newton can be inconsistent at times, I feel like, that with a really along with the lack of a Panthers running game, I would favor the Saints here. How do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. I think the Saints are the Saints are tough to beat at home. There's no question about that. And what makes the Saints so good this year is, one, their defense is much better than it's been the last 2 or 3 years. But also the addition of Alvin Kamara from the rookie from Tennessee has really helped that team. I mean, now they've got kind of the two-headed monster as well at running back between Ingram and him. It is hard to beat the Saints at home. I will say this, though. The game is going to really hinge on which Cam Newton shows up. Yeah. Okay. If the Cam Newton, who was the MVP of the league last year, shows up, I think the Panthers can play with them. I really do. But if the Cam Newton shows up that has been playing this year, which is kind of a erratic, unsure what you're going to get out of him, Cam Newton, then I don't see the Panthers beating the Saints. But even the best of the Panthers against the best of the Saints, I think it's going to be hard for them to beat the Saints in the dome. So I agree. I think the Saints come away with the victory in that one.
Yeah. Anyway, I mean, go ahead.
All I was going to say was, so given everything that we said, you and I just disagreed on one game, the Falcons and the Rams. But let's say the games go the way we said they were going to go.
Okay.
So then if the Falcons win, they're the 6th seed. And if the Saints win, they're the 4th seed. So you would have the Falcons going to
Philadelphia,
the Eagles, and you would have the Saints going to Minnesota.
Yeah.
So that would be an interesting setup right there. We can talk more about that next week.
Sure.
Now, if the Rams win the game, then the Rams would go to Minnesota, where they lost earlier in the season.
Yes.
And the Saints would still go to the Eagles.
Right.
So, or the Saints would then go to the Eagles.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting. I mean, it's going to be interesting either way you look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the AFC, just to kind of give that same kind of quick look ahead. You have the Jaguars, who I think we both thought were going to win. If they do win, they'd go to Pittsburgh. And then you have the Chiefs. If they were to win, which they are the higher seed and are going to be favored, they would go to New England, who they beat week 1.
Right.
So
Right.
that would be an interesting rematch on both ends. And the Jaguars beat the Steelers a week, I believe it was two, right, early in the season. One of those first few
Correct.
weeks, right? So those would be a couple of rematches where um, the top two seeds would be looking for revenge. But yeah, go
Well,
ahead.
I could tell you this right now: if the Chiefs have to go to New England, if the Chiefs can beat New England again, I'll paint myself red and run around the neighborhood 10 times in 20-degree weather.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
I
would agree
mean
with that.
there is no way that there is no way the Chiefs are going to go into New England again in the playoffs and beat Bill Belichick after having beat them on opening day when they unveiled their championship
Yeah,
banner and
yeah,
basically embarrassed them
right,
in front of the national audience.
right.
Now the Jaguars, on the other hand, if they take care of business against the Bills and Bortles looks like he's got it
Yeah,
together, they can very easily go into Pittsburgh
sure,
and beat the Steelers. There's no
sure,
question about that.
sure. Yeah. Um,
But either
and-
way, I think we're setting ourselves up for 2 good weeks of football.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, those are the two best weekends of football, I think, of the year, really, because you have the two games on Saturday and two on Sunday, and you get a lot of good games in the weekend. But yeah, so we'll
Let me
go ahead.
no, let me throw something out to you that just came across the wire. I'm sure you've seen it already. Carson Palmer announced his retirement, and
I didn't say
that was
that.
it. Yeah, it just
Okay,
flashed right now,
okay.
a day after Bruce Arians decided to retire.
Yeah,
So,
right.
what are your initial thoughts about that?
Oh man. Initial thought was I'm a little bit surprised, honestly. I think that I did see the Bruce Arians thing, so maybe that could have played into his decision a little bit. But I thought he had maybe 1 to 2 years left. I thought he might want to play those 1 to 2 years because you have. Um, I feel like the Cardinals still have kind of a little window to compete, maybe the next year or two, especially if Palmer's playing well. But the fact that he did go ahead and decide to retire is a little bit surprising initially. But um, when you look over his career as a whole now, I guess. I mean, he obviously I don't think he's a Hall of Fame quarterback, but he was a very good
No,
NFL
I
quarterback.
don't think so.
Right? He was a very good NFL quarterback for a handful of years there, especially in Cincinnati. He put up some good numbers and had that really good season. I think it was 2 years ago in Arizona as well, and kind of turned back the clock a
Right.
little bit. But yeah, I definitely am a little bit surprised about that.
Well, the real burning question, though, the real burning question of this retirement is: did Carson Palmer's wife quote Cap Rooney's wife from Any Given Sunday and slap him in the face when he told her he was gonna retire and say, "You have 2 or 3 good years left in you."
Yeah. I think he told her he'd been talking to some of the guys of the network, and that got her
Right.
upset. uh,
Oh boy. So Carson Palmer, he was a very nice quarterback, and he's had a couple injuries. He's had 2 ACL injuries, one back in 2005
yeah,
against the Steelers, and then of course the one a couple years ago with the Cardinals. And he's been around. He's been with the Raiders for a little
right,
while. He's
right.
had some good years with the Cardinals. I think it's time. I mean, the guy's what? He's got to be at least 36, 37 years old.
Yeah,
And another thing is, anytime you bring in a new head coach, more than likely you're going to have a new offensive system in place. And maybe he just didn't feel like he wanted to go through that again.
yeah, yeah. And so that means that Cardinals are now in the market for a QB as well. So maybe that's a destination for somebody like
Eli Manning, maybe.
Eli Manning. I was going to say Kirk Cousins, but Eli Manning. Eli Manning, we all know,
Yeah.
has had success in that stadium, specifically in the Super Bowl. But that's just another wrinkle to add to the NFL storyline here going forward, which is cool.
And another piece of news that just hit the wire, which is not that dramatic, but Marvin Lewis had announced that he wasn't coming back, and they just signed him. The Cincinnati signed him to a 2-year contract, so he's coming back as the coach of the Bengals
Huh.
for 2 more years.
I have to say I didn't say that either. So you're breaking news to me anyway. You're right on the Press Box podcast, but yeah, that's kind of crazy, right? I mean, they said that he wasn't coming back, and then now he is, and that. Gosh, I don't know. I mean,
but I think the interesting thing there was, the Bengals never did say it. It was Marvin Lewis who
oh
said,
yeah, well, okay,
yeah, his contract ran out this year, so he just said, hey, I'm going to look at other opportunities. But I guess maybe the Bengals, really when you think about it, the Bengals spend less money than any team in the NFL. They're a very frugal football team
Yeah.
as far as what they spend, and they're not going to get a better coach than Marvin Lewis. I mean, really,
Right.
when you think about
Right.
it, so. Maybe he liked what he saw when they upset the Ravens, and maybe he felt like, hey, maybe we can make a run at this thing sometime in the next 2 years with some good draft choices. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, in terms of coaching, there's let's see. I don't know all the openings off the top of my head, but the one that intrigues me the most is Gruden back to Oakland. So I
Yes.
think
Yes.
from what I'm hearing, that's just a formality. That's going to happen.
Well,
Which
what's
is
his name?
yeah,
Adam Schefter made the comment. Adam Schefter made the comment on ESPN. He said, "Hey, do you really think that the Raiders, after signing Del Rio to a 4-year extension in the offseason, would have fired him if they didn't know this was a done
right,
deal?"
right,
And I kind of agree with that. I mean, as crazy as the Raiders can be sometimes with the decisions they make, I don't think they're that stupid to sign a guy to a 4-year extension and have to buy that out if they didn't think they could get John Gruden to come
right,
back and coach the Raiders.
right.
So that'll be interesting. It really will be. From a lot of perspectives. I
Yeah,
mean, he had success with the Raiders. He
yeah,
kind of brought him back from the doldrums.
yeah,
He was a great coach, but then again, if you think about it, the last time John Gruden coached in the NFL, most of the current Raider players were in high school.
yeah. 2008.
So,
Yeah,
yeah. So the interesting thing is going to be how well do they respond to him? I
yeah,
mean, it's a different league.
yeah,
I don't know. It should be interesting, but it's going to certainly hurt Monday Night Football. That's for sure.
yeah. No question about that. No more Gruden grinders after the game on Monday Night Football. But
No.
yeah, I hope he does well because I like the league better when the Raiders are good. It brings back the memories of the classic 70s, 80s physical Oakland Raiders. So I hope that can come back.
Yeah, there's no question about that. I mean that would be great to see Gruden tromping on the sidelines once again. And they brought out another point that which makes a lot of sense. Even though he's been out of coaching for 8 years, since he's been on Monday Night Football, he spends week in and week out at other teams' facilities. He
Yeah,
knows the players in the league. He's got that quarterback thing where he talks to all the quarterbacks, the young
yeah,
quarterbacks that are coming out. So he knows the talent that's coming out of the NFL from a quarterback standpoint.
hmm,
He's got a pretty good quarterback there at Oakland. I mean,
yeah,
the guy had a drop off this year from last year, but he's still a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback.
yeah.
So, and Gruden knows. I mean, he's been close to the NFL. He may not have been coaching, but he hasn't been selling insurance. Let's just put
No,
it that way.
and then obviously his brother coaching the Redskins. He's kind of plugged in there as well. So absolutely.
Yeah. So the vacancies you've got right now, we've got, of course, the Giants, which have had a vacancy now for a few weeks. The Raiders, which technically have a vacancy, but we feel pretty sure it's going to be John Gruden.
Right.
The Bears have an opening. They fired John Fox.
Yep.
The Lions fired Jim Caldwell.
Right. Colts.
So the Colts have fired Pagano.
Right.
And the Cardinals now need a
Yes.
coach.
That's
So
right.
it's going to be interesting to see how some of these jobs get filled.
Yeah. Absolutely. One for you in here. One quick name on the road is I think you might even see some talk about the Jim Harbaugh's name being thrown around. From what I hear, is either the Indianapolis or Chicago job. He played for both of those teams, and then Indianapolis has Andrew Luck, who he had at Stanford. So that seems like kind of a fit there. But I'm not totally convinced he's going to leave Michigan, but it's something to look forward to as well.
Well, I agree with you, but I think Jim Harbaugh. I think he's an NFL coach,
Mm-hmm.
and really he has not done at Michigan what they've expected him to do. They got
Right.
beat by South Carolina yesterday,
Yeah. Yeah.
which was kind of a surprise. So I think if a team comes after him with the right amount of money and the right amount of control, Jim Harbaugh, that's one of the things that got him in trouble with San
Yeah.
Francisco was
Yeah.
him and the general manager,
Right.
kind of butted heads there. So
Right.
that could be a possibility.
Right.
And here's another interesting thing to throw out there. Well, just for conversational fodder is what about John Harbaugh? I mean, is his job in any kind of danger?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
gosh, the Ravens laid an egg. I mean, they were going to be the 5th seed in the playoffs, and they basically laid an egg.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those where, how much time does the Super Bowl buy you, right? Because I mean,
Right.
they won it in 2012 season,
Right.
2013 in February. But he's been there 10 years now, and like I said, that one Super Bowl. But overall, they've kind of underperformed a lot of the season. We expect them to do a little more, and they kind of fall short. It's a good point.
Well, Tom Coughlin won 2 Super Bowls, and it only bought him 4 more years after the second one.
Yeah.
John Harbaugh's won 1,
It's
and he's
been
coached, 4
5
more years?
Four or five. Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think he'll be back next year, but I think if the Ravens fail to make the playoffs again next year, I think you could see John Harbaugh be back on the market. And I'll tell you something, I wouldn't mind having him as a coach because sometimes, we've talked about this before too. Sometimes you just need to change a scenery.
Yeah.
Just because a guy gets let go from a job doesn't mean that guy did a bad job.
Right.
And it means that there's just difference in philosophy. Maybe he got tired, the team got tired, and they just couldn't see eye to eye anymore. So
yeah, I mean, look at those last couple of years with Andy Reid with the Eagles, and they were in a pretty bad way overall. And and then he gets picked up with the Chiefs, turns them around, and things are looking up for the Eagles now as well. So it worked out both ways.
exactly. The only advice I would give to Andy Reid is that, if he goes to another team after the Chiefs, find a team with a darker color spectrum. I mean, he kind of looks like Santa Claus in his red outfit, which
he's known for the all one color track shit. So he had that black going in Philadelphia, but like you said, that with the utility belt and everything, the red it lends itself more to Santa Claus than an NFL coach.
Oh boy, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. But
All
yeah,
right.
I mean, I think it's good. It's an exciting time of year. The next month with the NFL playoffs and the Super Bowl coming up. Yeah, exciting time for football fans. No question about it.
Absolutely. So, and like you said, we'll be covering discussing the NFL playoffs going forward here in the month of January. And
Right.
And stay tuned. Next episode, we will have another guest,
Right.
another college football coach, who I think we've mentioned before, but we won't go ahead and say his name now to jinx it. But look for a good interview, talking some college football, some high school football. This is coaching strategy in general. How we're coming up with our next podcast, right?
No question about it. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. All right. Okay, to wrap up this episode, we'd like to thank once again our sponsor, Bonus Room Art. Said it before, I'll say it again. Head to bonusroomart.com if you have not already. Seriously, check it out. That's again bonusroomart.com of some great artwork, art prints, custom art, all things like that. And also go to Instagram at bonusroomart. Give them a follow. Check out the page. Really good stuff, as we've been saying. So as we wrap up this episode, like we said, we'll be back in a few days on the Press Box Podcast with a great guest, college football coaching guest, and we'll get into some coaching talk, college football talk, high school football talk, and a guest. Again, we won't say his name, but I think a lot of you will know and remember for some of the stuff he's done, especially in the East Tennessee area. So looking forward to that, and stay with us on the Press Box Podcast as we will be back. And follow us on Twitter if you haven't, at PressBoxPod. And we'll keep more stuff coming in 2018, and looking forward to it.